Hi everyone, I'm Danielle Byington, and in this video we are talking about Samuel Pepys again, and specifically we're focusing on his entry from his diary, his notorious diary, about the event of the Great Fire of 1666. You will usually see this in history sources referred to as the Great Fire of London, by the way. So I have a map here for you. If you're a student of mine, or even if you're not, you can find very easily other maps where people have kind of digitally created a clearer outline. This is an old map showing where the fire occurred, and um, you can see where it's all white in the center here. So above the River Thames on the map, and then everything that's white. And even over there towards the right, where there's that kind of blocked section with a bit of white around it, that's the Tower of London. So everything in white there is roughly where the fire occurred. That's how much was destroyed. Um, I'm going to, and by the way, this happened on something called Pudding Lane. And it's not the kind of pudding you're thinking of, by the way. Let me show you on a map so I can kind of put that size in perspective for you. Um, so going all the way into London. So what you are seeing went in a little too far. What you're seeing on your map is, I think this lets me do annotations on the screen. Let me try. Here it is. So that zooming out an in bit that I just did to put all of that in perspective. The Tower of London, that was that kind of blocky portion on the right that's noted in white on the old map that I just showed you. And then there's a big portion of roughly about right here. That's not exact because I'm using a really crappy stylus too, by the way. So that's how much of the city was burned. And then up above here, roughly, is where Pepys's house was. At one point, he tells you about like being up on the roof, looking over here to the west in that direction, seeing the fire happening to the southwest, perhaps. And I think I can zoom in for you a little bit now. Let me remove those, so maybe nothing tricky will happen. Sorry, there's just a bit of a lag there with the annotation. London Bridge is right here, and roughly over there where it says Premier in London, that's not a promotion for Premier Inn. They're great and all, but this is not a promotion. Where you see those words on the map, somewhat roughly there. So to the east of where London Bridge meets the bank there, roughly in there is where Pudding Lane would have been. If you're a student in my class, you have a documentary in the supplements that shows you exactly where it is. Like they go to it based on an old map to find exactly where it would have been because, you know, it all burned down. So when it was rebuilt, it's not the same layout. It's not the same streets and blocks and buildings anymore, of course. Um, and you also have, can you see that right there? It's actually called Pepys Street. So remember that on the map, that is roughly right in that area there, Pepys Street. That's where the house is. There's a historical marker, one of the round blue ones they have over there, noting the house where he's watching all of this happen, where he's writing this in his diary that you're reading. So moving back to the PowerPoint for a moment. So in his diary, he talks about this happening bit by bit. As at first, when it starts, he talks about his maids coming and telling them at 3 in the morning. And this fire goes on for 4 days. So it goes Sunday through Thursday, September 6th. Um, if you read about this, I mean, it seems like a wildfire would be very unlikely in England because I think people think of it as being very kind of overcast and rainy. I mean, not all the time, but frequently, just bouts of rain because it's an island basically, and that's true. But specifically at this particular time, going through the into the end of August and there into the beginning of September, they had had a drought. There had been a bit of a heat wave. And so that mistake that the baker had made in Fairnurse Bakery there on Pudding Lane that I was pointing out, that's where it started, had made the mistake of accidentally pulling out some embers from the ovens that were still a little too hot. And so that hit some of the tender next to the ovens when he went to bed late that night. And then it took over the bakery and starts taking over the other homes. We'll talk about how they tried to prevent it from spreading in just a moment. Some things I want to point out here because I might ask you a question on the exam about the matter of the population and how this actually killed people. So they could see it coming. It was fast moving, but if you were watching it, being a spectator, like so many other people in the city watching it coming, uh, people were loading up their valuables and such. Pete says he sees many people loading up their goods on boats in the Thames River to get away from it. So they didn't die from this massive fire that destroyed the city. But later, when right after it, you have the fall coming, you have the winter coming, and you have people homeless living in these kind of encampments because you can't rebuild it overnight. And it's also the 18th century, so the engineering and construction matters are not going to be, there aren't going to be as many guidelines, there's not going to be as much organization, it's not going to happen as quickly. And so you have so many people displaced and they end up dying from the elements, exposure to the elements, the colder temperatures in that oncoming winter, and also just a general spread of disease and lack of sanitation. That could also that could be anything from wounds getting infected from minor accidents to you have viruses, such going around, any kind of illnesses like that. So, like, where's all of that sewage going to go? So I'm going to point to a couple of places in the actual diary now. So, just like I said, when I pointed out his house, he says some of our maids sitting up late last night to get things ready against our feast today. Jane called us up about 3 in the morning to tell us of a great fire they saw in the city. So I rose and slipped on my nightgown. I went to her window and thought it to be on the back side of Mark Lane at the farthest, but being he's not used to such fires as followed, I thought it far enough off. He thinks it's further away than it actually is, but you know, when you look at that map I just showed you, he was pretty close to it. So he first knows about it at 3 a.m. that night after it's taken over the bakery. Oh, by the way, another way they tried to alert people was by ringing the church bells in St. Paul's Cathedral, which that older one, that older version, went up in flames. It was destroyed. And the current St. Paul's Cathedral that you have today, it's an iconic landmark that was rebuilt in the way that it is because of the Great Fire, because the original was destroyed in the Great Fire. Um, there is something here. I want something else here I want to point out. Let's see if I see it. Nope, I gotta do a search. There's some things he tells you about thing, and this is like one of those great things about a diary as a historical source giving you, lighting up all these fine details of someone who's actually like there living the experience. So he says, and among other things, he saw these pigeons, the poor pigeons, I perceive, were loath to leave their houses, but hovered about the windows and balconies till they were, some of them burned their wings and fell down. Um, I think of pigeons nesting in the tops of some of these homes. So they want to stay because that's where they've made their nest, but that they're trying to flutter around the fire. They don't understand what's happening because nothing like this has happened before. There's another animal thing that he mentioned seeing. There was a cat that survived the fire. He says, I also did see a poor cat taken out of a hole in the chimney, joining to the wall of the exchange, with the hair all burned off the body, yet alive. So it kind of survived in the hole of the chimney there. Um, there is something else too. Why did it go all the way there? Hold on, let me turn that off. Let's just start here in September 2nd. This is what I'm looking for. I don't know why I wanted to jump to the middle. Sorry for the pause there. So up here, this is that first day it's happening. So back up in September 2nd, that first day, that Sunday. So I was called for because he worked in the king's court. This is Charles II, and did tell the king and Duke of York what I saw, and that unless his majesty did command houses to be pulled down, nothing could stop the fire. So he's giving advice to Charles II, to the King of England, of what to do to slow this down. And when he says to pull down houses, that was their version of firefighting back then. They could try to extinguish things with water, but it would be really difficult. Basically take too long as it's progressing. They just didn't have the proper resources to do that. So their go-to method was using these extremely long hooks. So let's say they're like anywhere from 10, 15, 20 feet long. So a large metal pole with a large hook on the top of it, kind of maybe like a shepherd's crook. And they reach into the top of the house because remember, these are medieval style homes. In the PowerPoint, I point out that the composition of these houses was basically just a mud paste and some sticks and a little bit of stone. So they could beat the hook into that paste in a wall, and several men, several firefighters would pull on the pole until the house comes tumbling down. Now, as you can imagine, the citizens like, wait, why does it have to be my house that's pulled down? Can't you pull my neighbor's house down? Because I don't want my house pulled down to stop this fire. Do it to someone else's. So there would be arguments about that. The residents would be fighting the firefighters about it, thus allowing the fire to spread even more. And so that was not as effective as you can imagine. Um, the final thing that one of the final things he talks about, let's go all the way down here into Thursday. On the last day, he talks about being up at 5 in the morning and to call our men to Bishop's Gate, where no fire had yet been. And there is now one broke out, which did give great grounds to people and to me too, to think that there is some kind of plot in this. So the thing about the plot was they start, instead of realizing, before it's actually investigated and they figure out this was just an accident, a terrible accident, mind you, but it started in the bakery. They were really wanting to blame other people. They wanted to blame Catholics. They wanted to blame, at the time, they had a big thing against the French and the Dutch. They wanted to blame immigrants of that sort. So the whole idea of who did this, who started this, was kind of one of the last things coming up in this final day that he documents from the Great Fire. Okay, that's all I want to talk to you about in this video about the Great Fire. Thank you for watching.